Hey everyone, welcome to Simply Stretch's very first podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sally. I am a child of God, and I started Simply Stretch just under a year ago now. So I'm so excited to be doing this. I'm so happy that you're here listening or watching, and I'm just so excited to do this podcast. I wanted to start this because podcasts were pivotal in my transition from lukewarm to all in with God. I think there's something about having real, raw, vulnerable conversations and just being real with people. And I think that's what people want in a world full of fakeness, deception. People crave real content and real conversation. So that's what I'm here to do. Here I am, and my walk is not perfect. It's not even close to perfect, and it never will be. And it's pretty hard to share. Just me being vulnerable. I'm going to try to be as vulnerable as I can, but it's kind of hard to do. So if you would just please be patient with me in this episode and episodes going forward. If you've been following along with Simply Stretch for a while now, you know that one of my pillars is authenticity and vulnerability. So I'm going to do my best to continue that here. But my experiences are not perfect, but I do think they're worth sharing because that's ultimately what brought me back home. So here it is. I named this podcast Going All In with God because in my testimony, that's really what it is. It's a process of going all in with God every single day. And there's also a moment in my testimony where I had to decide to just go all in. And I had to let go of the world. I had to let go of these habits that I was clinging to self-medicate and to get me through the day, and all these things that I thought were helping me so much that in reality were just hurting me. I know now, but there was that moment where I had to let go and actually give my life and give my every decision to God. And I think a lot of times people talk about their big moment with God, and I can't say that I've ever had one big defining moment. Like there wasn't one night that I was down on my knees crying and asking God to take over my life, but it was kind of a process for me, and I think that might be how it is for a lot of people that grew up in a Christian home, because you don't grow up not knowing God and then one day you come to Him. It's like you know Him, but at some point you decide to follow Him with all your heart. And that's my story anyways. So it's not to say that I was instantly transformed and one day I was a dirty, rotten sinner and the next I was a perfect image of God. Not at all. I I am still a dirty, rotten sinner every single day, and I wasn't instantly transformed. It's kind of been a year since I've had my going all in moment, and I'm still so far from I'm so far from being perfect, and I never will be. So it's a process, and I kind of like to think of it more that way instead of just a single defining moment. But this podcast is all about that process, and I want to invite you guys into my spiritual life and hope that I can have an impact on yours too. So thank you so much for being here, tuning in. We can kind of get into my testimony. I grew up in a Christian home. We attended church pretty regularly and grew up with Christian parents and family, and they definitely did their best to send us on our way knowing God. And that continued through middle school. I went to church camp for the first time, and that was really the first time that I felt on fire for God. And if you've ever felt that way, that's like the best feeling ever. You have so much power. You can go and do anything. You're going to change the world for God. And I would give anything to feel that feeling again for the first time. But while I was there, I felt called into ministry. And I didn't really know what to do with that at the time because I didn't really know what that meant. I just thought that meant that I had to be a pastor. And I was already starting to get some flack for being a goody two shoes at school and not being able to fit in very well. And so I was like, well, I don't want to be known as this pastor, you know? So I kind of foo-fooed it away, and I didn't really know that there was other options other than just being a pastor. So I just ignored it for a while. I kept it in the back of my head, but that was the first time I felt called into ministry. And then middle school ended, high school came around, I turned 14, and I became very, very lonely. I didn't have a lot of friends. I had maybe 2 friends going into high school, and we all know high school is a hard time, and all of my siblings had moved out, went to college, or moved away. They're off doing their thing, so it was just me and my parents at home. I grew up with 4 siblings, so usually it was a pretty busy house. But yeah, so I didn't have many friends. My siblings were gone, and I didn't have great relationships with either of my parents. My mom and I were just not getting along at that point in our lives. We spent a lot of time arguing, as most teenage girls do with their moms. And my dad just worked a lot, so I really didn't see him a whole ton. But to no one else's fault, I turned to guys to fill that void in my heart, that loneliness. And we started Snapchatting, and it kind of became the instant gratification that I was looking for. It filled that hole, but not really, you know? But I saw it as a loophole. And even though I didn't think I wasn't fully compromising my values, it was still treated in the same way. And that led me to believe that love and lust were the same thing. And that's a pretty dangerous place to be in, especially for a young teenage girl. And when that didn't work, inevitably, I kind of fell into a depression and a self-destruct cycle because I associated those bad things with a dopamine hit. So then I was always searching for more and more of those bad things because I knew I would get that dopamine hit off of it. And I started talking to more guys, constantly searching for more, and then in turn becoming more and more depressed, falling into this darkness more and more. That same year, I got drunk for the first time. I got extremely blacked out. So I was 14 at the time, and my parents had just kind of left for a family event that night, so I was home alone, again, feeling very lonely, sad, and I knew there was some alcohol that I could sneak without them knowing, and I was like, you know what, we'll just try this thing out. And so I ended up drinking so much. I've never got that drunk again after that point in my life. I ended up, I don't even remember going from our garage into my bedroom, and I ended up puking all over my bedroom. And luckily, one of my friends came over, and a couple of my sisters, and they helped make sure that I didn't choke and die that night. So it was a pretty horrible night, and my parents asked me why the next morning. And I still remember I didn't want to tell them that I was sad and lonely. I just wanted to stop talking about it. And so I just lied to them and told them it was because I was bored and I had nothing better to do. So, as you can imagine, I got in lots of trouble for that one, as I should. And after that, I didn't touch alcohol for about a year. I was pretty terrified of it after after blacking out that hard and not knowing what would have happened if my friend and sisters weren't there. So I was pretty terrified for a while, but eventually my common sense and my fear unfortunately wore off. And the next year I started partying just about every weekend in a further effort to make myself feel whole again. I was just at a point where I was so sick of being called the good girl and, being known as like the good Christian girl. And I knew that my friends kind of wanted me to go in that direction. And when I would start like drinking more and eventually getting into drugs, they were like almost proud of me for it because they were just so surprised and I had condemned them for doing it. And then now I was doing the same thing and, becoming more fun and doing more risky things, and I could just fit in now. So I found myself way easier fitting in with everyone, and I wasn't going against the grain of the world anymore. I had just kind of given into it, and so yeah, I could fit in then, and I thought that I found my place, So I continued portraying the good girl to my parents and coaches and anyone who I thought wanted me to be that way. And I lived a different life on the other side of that. And my relationship with my mom got worse because I was lying to her face about drinking and partying and was just falling deeper and deeper into this darkness. And that affected all of my relationships. And once again, I didn't think that I was compromising my values because I saw so many other Christians drinking and partying and doing drugs and all these things. So I didn't think that it was wrong. I thought that the Christians that thought that drinking was bad or that didn't drink or party or whatever were just way over the top and kind of out of touch with life, out of touch with the real world. And so I didn't think that what I was doing was wrong. I thought that I could party on Saturday and go to church on Sunday and all would be forgiven. But even though I was, having the time of my life, I lost friends and hurt relationships with my family, and most importantly, grew further and further from God. And I didn't know that this sin was what was causing separation from God. So that kind of went on for the next couple of years. Flash forward to junior year, things got a little bit better. I finally figured out that guys weren't filling this hole in my heart, and my friends and my family figured that out too, and they helped me move from these unhealthy relationships into healthier relationships. And I continued to party and feel lonely even though I was in better relationships. So I was just a little bit less lonely, but I was still not in a good place. But I finally got that one part of my life figured out, and it's kind of funny. I journaled from time to time throughout this period, so I thought I would dig that out and read through some of the prompts in preparation of my testimony, and I found a few entries that were me very frustrated at these unhealthy relationships, and the one thing that I cried out to God for was for a better relationship and for me to be able to get over these unhealthy ones, because I would say that I was over it and then go back and say I was done and then go back. So I was in this bad cycle. And so finally, that was the one part of my life that I cried out to God for help with multiple times. And I don't think that's any coincidence that that's the one part of my life that got better. So anyways, senior year came along, Corona started. Well, I guess Corona started my junior year, but it bled into senior year. And one of my sisters is a travel nurse, so she asked me if I wanted to come move with her to Arizona for a 3-month travel contract. And there was nothing that I wanted more than to get out of my parents' house. I had wanted that since I was like a little kid. So I just was ready to be independent. So I thought I kind of hit the jackpot there. And by this time, I had begun dating my now husband, and it was great moving to Arizona. It was the middle of winter in Minnesota, so it was freezing here, but it was so nice in Arizona, and the only responsibilities I had were walking my sister's dog a couple times a day and doing my schoolwork. So I had a lot of time to myself, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I did not have my plate full to the brim with things to do to distract me from my loneliness. So I kind of had to face it a little bit. And so then I kind of went into what I called my self care, my self healing era. And I started going to a church that I resonated with. I started reading my Bible and doing devotions, and I started going on long walks every day and praying or calling my friends and talking to them. I started to mend fences with my mom a little bit, and I mostly stopped drinking because I couldn't go out to bars. I was underage, and I didn't have friends down there to party with either. So I mostly stopped drinking, and my mental health improved so much that for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight lift off of my shoulders. I felt that fog go away a little bit. It was pretty amazing. And then after those 3 months were up, I moved back home. It was just before I graduated high school, and I snapped right back into my old patterns. I moved out of my parents' house after I graduated and got a desk job. But I fell right back into partying every weekend because I was back with my friends now, and I've stopped making time for God. I I stopped taking care of myself. And doing that was pretty rough, even though I was with the love of my life. I had my still now husband. I had moved out of my parents' house, which I had been waiting to do for years and years and years. I had a good paying job. I bought my dream car. I had friends to party with on the weekends. And I was finishing my high school degree I was finishing my college degree that I started in high school, which was all part of my big life plan. I was right on track for my life plan. Other than that, I wasn't making time for God because most Sundays I was too hungover to go to church. I was too hungover to go to church, and I definitely wasn't making time to read the Bible during the week. There was one Sunday that I went to church, and I was extremely hungover. I'm fairly certain I had alcohol poisoning, and I puked on the road on the way to church. I puked multiple times during the service, on the road after church, and all day and all night. And I just remember thinking, like, well, this is just self-inflicted, and I had so much fun last night, so it doesn't matter. Like, I didn't see that being hungover wasn't worth it, because in my mind, I still needed that escape to get me through life. And that's really what drinking was for me. It was an escape. But I kind of became this shell of the Sally that I had known, just a couple months ago when I was in Arizona. And that Sally that existed in Arizona was a shell of the Sally that existed before high school and before I started falling into all of this stuff. So I was a shell of a shell, and I felt so empty, and I didn't know why. And so I kind of was like, all right, I know that my mental health is a problem, and I'm going to do everything I can to fix it. So I kind of started going down the list and fixing things as I went. I thought maybe it was my birth control messing with my hormones, so I got off that and lifted the fog a little bit, but not permanently. Didn't do what I was looking for. I thought it might be, just because I had a boring job or because I was working too much. I thought it was because I didn't go to the gym enough, so I started going to the gym at 4:30 in the morning every day. And I thought it was maybe because I was addicted to my phone, so I set limits on myself and started dealing with my phone addiction. I started eating extremely healthy. I was tracking my macros and following a strict diet, and I started doing yoga again because I'd started doing that in Arizona. So I thought maybe, that would transfer. Maybe that was why my head was so clear then. So I started doing yoga again and taking more me time, and just about every other excuse there is out there for bad mental health. And even though I worked on all of those things, I still didn't improve, and I was stuck again. And then I had someone suggest to me weed gummies, and I was like, I never really thought that I would smoke weed or do edibles or anything, but I was kind of at the end of my rope, and I was like, well, they can't hurt, and I was like, well, the gummies, I'm not smoking them, so it's really not that bad for you, and it's a natural thing, and it's probably better than drinking. So I decided to start taking weed gummies, and I started out pretty tame, you slice it up and just take a little bit. But the first time I tried it, I was like, wow, these things are magic. Like, I can do this. I can make it to 5 p.m. every day, and then I can get home and I can have a gummy, and I can return to this normal, happy, giggly self that I haven't felt like in years. And I can be productive. I can clean the house. I can do my schoolwork. I can do all the things that I wanted to do before, because I just felt so empty, and that just, it lifted the fog enough for me to be happy again. And, at that point, I had plenty of friends because I was partying with them every weekend, and I had the love of my life, so I felt a little bit less lonely, but I still felt empty. So I thought that was going to kind of be my lifelong solution. I thought that, all I have to do is make it to 5 p.m. every day. I can get home, have a gummy, and everything's going to be just fine. I can still function. I don't get blacked out. I don't feel crappy the next day. It's amazing. But then eventually I was like, okay, well, weed's not that bad, and then at parties, like, you smoke it, you don't have edibles. So I got into smoking weed, and I got addicted to, like, the actual physical act of smoking, just being able to, like, breathe in and breathe out and just let all of your thoughts and emotions go. And so that kind of led to me coming home every night after work and either smoking, taking an edible, or drinking an entire bottle of wine to get me through the night. And then weekends, I was either partying, drunk, or recovering from the night before. So I was also doing yoga so much, like, every day, and started taking classes. And then you kind of get into less of the stretching and more of the mental and spiritual aspects of it. And I was really relying on substances and yoga for fixing my mental health, which clearly weren't working because I still felt empty. I still felt stuck, and I remember the way that I always thought about it was like I was constantly drowning in a foot of water. That's how it felt. That was the best way to describe it. But I kind of hid all of this from everyone around me. I mean, people knew that I was a party girl and people knew that I smoked and stuff, but I hid all my feelings because, it was pretty normal, at least for all my friends and my family, to party. So that I didn't really need to hide that anymore. But I did need to hide my feelings because I was doing it for all the wrong reasons. I hid my feelings from myself too. It was the only way to get through it. And that kind of went on for the next 2 years. I continued partying, smoking, self-care stuff. And I decided that I wanted to start a yoga business. I wanted to have purpose in life again, and I wanted to share the one thing that I thought was getting me through these dark times. I didn't know that it was making it worse. I thought it was making things better. So I was very excited. I thought that was going to fix my couple mental health issues of, having a boring job and working too much. So I was very excited to start this business, and I shared that with my family. A couple of my sisters did yoga as well, so we were able to bond over that a little bit. And then one day my sister sent me a video from Nayla Rose. For those of you who don't know her, she's got a small YouTube channel and talks about her transition from New Age, from being a witch and a yoga teacher to being a Christian, born again. Anyways, she sent me the video of her testimony out of yoga, and I remember getting it and being like, I'm not going to watch that. Like, that just seems ridiculous. But in the back of my head, I knew that it would change my life. I knew that, I had a feeling that being a Christian and doing yoga was kind of a tricky line to walk. I actually looked back in our text, and that's exactly what I told her. I was like, I'll have to give that a listen sometime. Being a Christian and practicing yoga is a tricky line to walk. So I knew that there was something a little bit off about it, because when I was studying it, when we got to the history of yoga and its roots, where it came from, it was like you had to learn a whole different language, and it came from Hindu religions and all the Hindu gods. And so I knew that something about it felt a little bit off, and I knew that was going to ultimately lead to my going all in moment, which I really avoided because I didn't want to become one of those Christians that were over the top, like I mentioned earlier. So I finally worked up the courage to watch it like a week later after she sent me it. And instantly I knew that yoga was wrong. She did a great job at explaining the Bible versus what yoga teaches. And so I knew that it was wrong after watching that. And I quit yoga, rebuked it after doing some more research, and moved on with my life and quit doing my certification, all that stuff. And I searched for an alternative, and this all was happening in February of 2024, and I couldn't really find an alternative, so that was where the idea for Simply Stretch was born. But that really isn't the end of my testimony. That's kind of just the beginning. Because I was going to be redeemed, and I had a lot of pruning to go through before I got to where I am today. So after that, I found the Heaven and Healing podcast from Nayla, because Nayla and Angela are super good friends anyways. So I started listening to her podcast, which is talking a lot about the sins that nobody really talks about. She talks about Halloween and the sin of overeating, and She has so much good content. You should definitely go check her out as well. A ton of stuff on New Age as well. And so I started to watch her podcast, and then my sister also recommended Girls Gone Bible, which is a podcast I love so, so much, and I'm sure so many of you do too. But both of those were just so relatable because it wasn't Christians that had been a Christian their whole life and had, walked a perfect line. It was people coming out of the world and into Jesus's arms. Like, it was so relatable, and they were going through all the same things I was going through in real time. And it was so refreshing to just know that I wasn't in it alone. So I felt a lot less lonely then. And I began to feel gentle yet persistent convictions about sin in my life. Obviously, first it was yoga, then it was drinking, smoking, swearing. So many things that you don't realize are sins until you really do some self-examining and start studying the Bible. So I cut all of that out of my life, and I was like, all right, I'm good. I got all the sin out of my life. Like, I got all the big stuff, and I'm good to go. And God was like, yeah, no, you're just getting started, actually. That's not how this works. I was like, dang it. Unfortunately, I was just getting started. So I started reading my Bible daily, spending time in prayer, seeking God first, and actually went all in. Like, actually gave my life and decided I was going to give up all of these worldly things. I was going to give up drinking, even though I might lose friends over it. Like, it was okay because I had Jesus, and none of it was worth it. Like, all of it just led me further into darkness. So I was just clinging so hard onto something that was so bad for me. Like a dog to its vomit. I just kept going back. So I finally decided to give all that up, and I went through the process of pruning. It was a rough time. It was hard. It was constantly looking at my life and seeing something I need to prune out, and doing research and studying the Bible to see if this was really something that I needed to get rid of. And I got rid of it, and then I'd get comfortable, and I'm like, oh yeah, I got all of it taken care of. And then a few days later, something else comes along, and it's like ripping out all of these parts that were just so bad for me that I hadn't seen before. And it was so funny because it's like, if that would have been sprung on me on day one, like, you need to get rid of drinking, smoking, swearing, like, all of that day one, I would have been like, no, that's too much. I can't do all that. Like, I'm not strong enough. And I think as I began to get stronger in my faith, God gently pushed me to get rid of those things, and was like, it's okay if your friends don't see it this way. It's okay if your family doesn't see it this way. It's okay if it's just you and me. Like, he's got me, So that was pretty cool. It's a very awesome process. The process of pruning, the process of going all in. And I'm still working on it, because now that I've got rid of, the big sins in your life, I've kind of moved on to a lot of heart work. And man, that's just as hard, if not harder, because sin, you can decide not to drink one day or get drunk. And so I just decided to not get drunk anymore. I still have the occasional glass of wine or seltzer or whatever, but I know where the line is. And so I decided to not get drunk one day, and I haven't looked back. But these heart problems like pride and condemnation, and oh man, there's so many. We'll just stick with pride as an example for a minute, but you can't just decide to not be prideful anymore and then just never have a problem with it again in your life. Like, that's something that I'm going to struggle with for a long time, and I have to constantly go to God every morning, renew my mind, and ask Him to take that away from me, because I don't want to be separated from Him even an inch. Like, I know that I have to lay these things down to become closer to God, and I have to constantly lay them down every single day. And I think it'll get easier with time, but I don't know if it'll ever go away. So that heart work is hard, and you have to stay persistent, and that's what this pod is all about. It's about the decisions and the hard work that it takes to go all in. And it's easier when we can do it together. So that's the heart of this pod, and that's my heart poured out. I want us to be able to take on this world together, because sometimes it's really hard to take that first step and go against the world. But it's so much better when we can have other people to go through it with. You don't have to feel alone in it, and you're never alone in it. I hope that you guys have a better idea of who I am and where I came from and how imperfect I am. I think that's a very common theme throughout this episode. And yeah, just know that I'm not this perfect Christian girl. I make my fair share of mistakes, and I've made some horrible mistakes that I wish I could take back and that I'm ashamed of. And I know that I don't need to be ashamed of it, because it's my past and it brought me to where I am today. And I know that God's forgiven me, but it's pretty hard to share sometimes still, because I'm not proud of the girl that I was back then. But I'm really happy to get to share it with you, because I know that it's going to help other people in their walks. At least I hope it will. So I hope that you'll decide to go through this with me, because I need support just as much as you do. So please come along on this journey with me. I love you guys so much. Thank you so much for listening or watching. And I hope that you'll come back for our next episode next month. But if you'll just pray with me. Dear Lord, thank you so much for bringing these people to this podcast today. I pray that they were able to relate and get something out of my testimony. Thank you for opening up our hearts to you. Thank you for giving us a gentle, guiding hand to go through life with, because we would be so lost without it. And I'm sure most of us were lost at one point. So thank you for being a wonderful Father and loving us no matter how many times we leave you or forsake you. You're always there. And that is something that no one on earth could ever do for another person. So we're just so grateful for that. Lord, please be with each and every one of us. Please bless our lives and let us be led closer to you. Thank you so much, Lord. We love you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.